E3 2022 has officially been canceled. I kind of want to share my thoughts on this because I feel like I have a few thoughts as to why this is done and what the outcome or fallout could be. I mean, granted, I also read an article as to why, but I also wanted to share my thoughts. And whether or not you care, I mean, I don't care. I don't know. I'm going to share my thoughts anyway and just do something that's like not scripted, off topic of what I usually do, and kind of hear what you collectively think about E3 and these gaming conventions. As someone who hasn't been to a convention since the COVID-19 pandemic started, I still am a little skeeved out by the whole going in, social interaction with a bunch of people and being in such close quarters, especially with new variants coming out left and right. It's kind of like not worth it, honestly. And I think that's pretty much the point of what they're trying to do. Is I think E3 has been something that's been struggling over the years. They haven't had the same amount of, community, to come into the entire thing. Because originally E3 was for developers, creators, and people in the media. Like, if you'd go on, like, IGN, like, one of the writers or something would show up, and that guy's mom or something. Like, the people would get tickets, but it wasn't an open to the public thing. In the last couple of years, there hasn't been much of a draw in terms of E3. People were opting out, meaning companies were opting out, and the way to bring people back was for that way they could like open it up to the masses. You could buy a ticket, your friend could buy a ticket, your grandmother could go, your dog, your cat, who cares, could all go and have fun. Now, I think these conventions are fun. I recommend going to them if you ever, when all this crap ends, which hopefully that ends soon. I don't know at this point, but this isn't about that. As someone who's gone to PAX East, I used to love going. I didn't go all the time. I didn't go like every year. I went probably every other year or so, and it's a blast. I mean, you get to meet creators and developers and kind of just talk to my biggest thing was like talking about like to the developers and being like, hey, question for you, like what's the action towards cheaters or whatever kind of concerns you may have. You can at least talk to someone that's not going to be on a virtual screen. You're talking to a real person that can give you kind of a real answer as to, maybe what their plan is to fix a certain thing, or get more than 150 characters out of somebody and say, this was a probably better discussion, and things that they may not have thought of, they're like, oh crap, like maybe we could do that, and see if we could do that, instead of it being kind of a guy who's behind a screen and probably not telling anyone in a meeting room what this idea that you may have had was. For instance, I remember going to PAX East a few years ago, and Cliffy B was there. I think this was the time Lawbreakers was out. I think I mentioned this in a separate video, but it was at the time Lawbreakers was coming out, and I asked him a couple questions, and it was interesting to talk to him because I felt like there was a point where I forgot what one of the questions I asked, but I think he kind of was like, oh crap, I didn't even think of that outcome. And it was just interesting to have that dynamic where you're not talking to someone who has 150 characters, or someone who may not even try to push back to like someone in the development team and say, hey, they may not like this. So it was kind of interesting, that whole dynamic. But again, E3 is something that's been dying. Kind of just talking about the overall, E3 isn't as great as it used to be. Again, a lot of developers, a lot of publishers are pulling out because there's nothing really there for them, which I'm surprised, because I feel like E3, regardless of kind of where it was still the biggest thing of the year. I remember always looking forward to the last week of June, or kind of like some point in June. I think it used to be like the last week. I could be wrong, but it was always interesting, like when I was in school and stuff, looking forward to it. I'd come home and watch what was going on and stuff like that. There were sometimes, I think a couple of years when I was working, that I ended up taking weeks off to watch some of the stuff at E3 and see what was really happening, and had a dream of going to E3. Even as a kid, I would make videos and whatever and hope to go to E3 and whatever. Besides that, I feel like E3's biggest problem is that they seem to try too hard to be mainstream, when the thing with E3 that was so fun to watch was that they were so unique. They were so independent. And they weren't catering to certain audiences. And I think that's part of the problem, is they're catering to audiences that, like, go watch, there's a great video. One of my favorite videos, me and my friends watched it. I think we even watched it at the time in my buddy's place. And it was the Rage 2 trailer. When it came on, was a fucking disaster. Like, they tried to cater to this audience that wanted to see this guy play live rock music or something like that. And the audience was just dead silent. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted this guy to be there. It was just very awkward and weird, and no one knew exactly where to go with that. Again, that's part of the problem. I think they just try to do these big things that make no sense, and I that could also be part of the problem with the publisher, the developer. They decide to do these things to get people amped up for their game, but there's just something like, how do you get people amped up for something that most likely they're going to watch on their computer or phone? So that's part of the problem. Again, another part of the problem is that the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you really fix that problem? Again, lastly, I feel like what E3 needs to do is take the step back and become more original. Not mainstream, not with TikTok and all this other crap. I mean, I guess TikTok does help brands, but being completely honest, they need to find a better way to just make it unique again. It's no longer unique. It's just an event that exists and that people tune into. And it was always had like the biggest trailers and everything else. They need to find a way to bring those developers back, and or publishers or Xbox, PlayStation, whatever, and prevent them from having these own events, because that's what happens now. PlayStation has its own event, Xbox has its own event every year now. Instead of going to E3, they're no longer announcing the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X at E3. They're going, well, we could make our own money and do it that way. Like, there's nothing in it for these publishers anymore. They can just do their own event. Unless you're a smaller publisher, there's nothing in it for them. I will bet you millions of dollars, now that Xbox has Call of Duty, when that kind of deal finalizes and stuff like that, you'll see that in the Xbox event. The Xbox will have its own event somewhere in LA or something, and then they're going to end up releasing bunches of trailers and everything else, similar to how E3 would be. But you're going for the thing that you want to watch. Nobody wants to watch all these other platforms and other things that are going to go on. So they need to find a way to kind of build that together and make it unique again, and keep these developers and publishers all under that same umbrella of E3 and make it worthwhile for them. So that's kind of my whole point. I hope E3 stays around. But the other thing is I want to bring up is E3, I don't think is going to last much longer beyond this. I think it's been a thing that's dying, and if they can't do that, bring all those developers back, because that's really what's killing them, I think they're fucked. I really do. I think they're fucked. I don't think they have a shot in hell to get anything going, and that you'll see E3 die out, and a bunch of these other big events, like maybe PAX East might not, because I think it's very indie developer centric, and a lot of people seem to like those kind of events. Plus, they have like bigger things here and there. But those like E3s, maybe Gamescom, I'm not really sure how big that is anymore. But those events may just eventually die out and no longer be a thing. So I'm interested to see what happens with E3. I'll keep you guys updated if I hear anything, but I don't know, man. I mean, I'm just a guy with a microphone that you continuously listen to for whatever reason. So, but I appreciate that. Anyway, that's my thoughts on E3. As sucky as it is, that they're delaying it again, I think this is the first signs of the end. I don't know if there's a good recovery for this unless they can get everyone back underneath that one umbrella. If not, I don't think it's going to last much longer. So, what do you guys think of E3 being pushed back or canceled? Do you guys think this is a good thing or a bad thing? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm curious what people think of E3 anymore. And what conventions do you guys typically go to? I'm curious. Do you guys go to PAX East or something like that? Because I'm not going to this year's. Maybe if COVID's better next year, I'll end up going to next year's, and maybe I'll do something or whatever, like a fan event. I don't know. It's weird to say. But let me know in the comments. I'm curious. So thanks for watching, and well, bye.